Do you think that there is a relationship between Gamergate of yesterday, of 10 years ago, and the current sort of state of our culture today?
That's a difficult question to answer, and I don't know. Um, my first book was titled "Gamergate: First Battle of the Culture War," and at the
Right.
time I believed that. I still think that there might be something to the culture war framing, but I mean the fact is like we live in a society where a large number of people have different competing viewpoints and interests, and people are always going to have like different ideas about what exactly the culture, quote unquote, should be, and what types of things that they want to see in that culture. Uh, Conservatives, libertarians, woke people, they these people like maybe not the wokeness always as an ideology hasn't always existed necessarily, but
It's very, well,
the
at least
battle,
as it exists now, it's very recent.
yeah, as it exists now, yes, but the idea of there's going to be some sort of conflict in society between like different groups who have different cultural values. That's probably always going to happen in a free society. Um, Now, as for how Gamergate like specifically relates to it, like Gamergate was I guess the first group of people you could say that was like that stood up to these people and was victimized by them on a large scale. And so because of that, Gamergate probably did influence the culture war, especially in the beginning, to a pretty like moderately sized extent. Where if you were on the side of like freedom of speech, if you were on the side of neutral institutions and hearing out like a plurality of viewpoints, then you were probably going to be on the pro GG side, or at least like neutral but relatively sympathetic to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you didn't hold those views, there's like a pretty fair chance that you're going to end up on like the anti-Gamergate side, and you're going to like try to demonize or dismiss these people as being, oh, they're just misogynists who hate women and want to drive them out of gaming, and they're probably harassers too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as time has gone on, the culture war, I mean, it's been a decade. Most people, I guess, don't really care about the specific Gamergate stuff anymore because it's time moves in one direction. And I think that the values of Gamergate, which probably did influence the early culture war to some extent, probably don't play much of a role today in the culture war. Like if you look at the right today, the culture war is basically, in many ways, it's basically just taken partisan lines, and large numbers of people who don't even know what Gamergate is are engaged in the conversation, and a lot of them on both sides don't really care about Gamergate values, quote unquote, like freedom of speech. They just want speech for their own side.
Do you think the right does that?
Yeah.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah. The moral panic, I guess you could say, over books and libraries.
You
Like
mean
my
like the books that the you mean the books that are being read at schools that talk about anal sex and blowjobs and stuff that they don't want
there
kids
are
being taught?
there are a couple of books like that, yeah, and I'm not a fan of that. But there's also hundreds of books that are being removed from school libraries, and not just school libraries, but public libraries too, actually. And the person who's running for Secretary of State in Missouri, I don't know if they'll win the primary or not. We'll see. But for the Republican side, they literally took library books from the library and then took a flamethrower and lit them on fire and said that they're going to burn these woke books from the public library, not even a school library, but from a public library. So it doesn't seem like I would trust the right to be especially pro free speech. They also, of course, the right today, I think it's probably worth pointing out, did try to stay in power after losing the last election.
That didn't work out though, right? And do you think that the Republican Party is the right?
In the United States context, I mean, like, I wouldn't say that they're like they encompass the entirety of the right, but I think that they are the political faction, the political party that broadly represents the right in the United States of America.
Okay. I don't want to get in because that's sort of like a different topic, but I would suggest that most people that I know that are on the right despise the Republican Party. And it's because they act similar to the Democrat Party. And this is why I asked, because when I hear about like this, so and so Republican from this state did this thing, I don't think that right wingers, people that I know to be right wingers, agree with any of that stuff. When it comes to the books, the only thing I will say is that I think that they are more concerned about, and I'd have to see what the books are, like the ones that are not sexualizing children and teaching, like there's like woke kindergarten now, and putting queer theory and critical race theory into teaching material, I think is a serious issue because you're raising a generation of activists that can't add, subtract, or divide. And you can see that by the test scores. And I think that that's a serious problem that needs to be addressed. Now, I don't know that it should be done at the legislative level because I find that that's not productive, but people should be aware of it. And I think that there are definitely some cases where, in particular, books that are inappropriate for children should not be in schools. In libraries, sure. In bookstores, sure. Whatever. I'm not against that. I'm a free speech absolute. There is some cause for concern when it comes to that, and I still don't see that is anywhere near what the left does. Because I think that there's this thing that people do because they want to appear to be the most reasonable. They try to find ways to like balance out the blame so that they look like they're in the middle. And the truth is that there is no center. The left runs most of our institutions. They're in our media, they're in our films, they're in our video games, they're in every hobby, they're in every bit of entertainment, and they are using that to bludgeon everyone into submission. And this comes from the fact that they were taught this way of life or this perspective in colleges and universities. So the universities and the education system is creating activists and putting them into the workforce, and those people are influencing everything. It is what's happening. This is not even debatable. This is not a matter of opinion. This is a fact. And the only, even the people in politics that have an R next to their name have the same authoritarian streak that runs through them. And so it doesn't really matter. This is why I said the parties are irrelevant. It comes down to your principles and your values. And I think that this is the reason why a lot of people that would be considered on the right are generally, they don't like the party that's supposed to represent them. And this is also true in other countries. In Canada, the Conservative Party is not like a right-wing party. It is basically like still a kind of center-left party. In the UK, the Tory party is despised, again, by normal British people that just want simple things like closed borders and low taxes and, things like this. This is the until the day comes that like the Daily Wire is like a game studio that's producing games that force people to like, I don't know, kill the gays or something, or convert like trans people or whatever. I'm not going to consider these things two sides. Like it's just not. There's clearly one side that has a tremendous amount of power and everyone else is just kind of like trying to lay low. And I don't think it's working out. This is why I think the culture war it's not even a war really, because, and I'll let you talk. I'm sorry for just going off here, but it's not even a war really. It's just one-sided. I mean, what do we have here that's like let's look at Hollywood, for example. Now, of course, some of these studios are losing money, but you got like every studio is pushing out like all kinds of progressive stuff. And they're generally, when it comes to franchises, they've really only taken the franchises that were generally populated, funded, supported, and grown by men. Men who spend money on Marvel movies, on Star Wars stuff, on Star Trek stuff, on Lord of the Rings. I mean, like whatever. And I'm not saying women don't get into that, but it's not even close. Like the amount of effort and energy and support and enthusiasm from men that goes into these things, and James Bond, and like I can go on, right? And it's all getting like subverted and torn up from the inside out. And men, even though these like the last Marvels movie, the Marvels, it was a massive, it was like a record flop, like only made like 40 something million, and still the majority of people that went to watch it were men. So it's specifically targeting that's and it's coming from like overwhelmingly from one side. Now, on the other hand, you got like some studios that are producing, I don't even know if I would call it right-wing content. Just like right-wing content today just means a movie that stars a white guy, like Mission Impossible, right? Or like Top Gun. Is that right-wing? I don't think it is. I think it's just normal. But of course, because it's so skewed, the people in the business, the people that do the reviews, the people that like look at this stuff and talk about this stuff will say, "OMG, look at how what is it, male, pale, and stale this is," and they will treat it like it's a right wing thing, and it's like, but it's just Top Gun or it's just Mission Impossible. And when you actually get sort of, I wouldn't even call it right wing, but I say conservative content or something, you might get like something like Nefarious, which was a movie about a guy who was on death row, and he's like possessed by a demon. It's kind of like a take on the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Nobody watched that. I mean, I saw it because I was curious, and it was a bit preachy, and I was like, eh. But I didn't feel like it was like tearing something up that I grew up with. It wasn't, like basically every major franchise. So I don't see this as a tit for tat kind of thing. I just don't think it is. And I think that because we tend to kind of like let this stuff ride, like, well, I don't want to make a big deal out of it. Like I saw this with David Jaffe. You familiar with David Jaffe?
The game developer?
Yeah, game developer. Yeah, he created God of War and Twisted Metal. So I've interviewed David Jaffe on my channel a couple of times years ago. I was very excited about it because I'm a big fan of those games. I love Twisted Metal. I have nothing but fond memories of playing that with my friends. And I really liked God of War. They were fun action games. And I brought him on because this Gamergate thing was going on. He got kind of swept up in it. He didn't know what it was. And I said, well, let me bring him on my show and I'll explain it to him. And I remember there was an interview he did. It was about God of War 3, I think. And it was on, who was the guy? Was it Ben Kuchera, maybe? Do you remember what I'm talking about? And
God of War 3 interview with it? I don't remember the
God
specific
of War 3,
interview. No.
yeah, I think it was. You remember that?
Not the specific interview, no.
Oh, okay. Well, there was a God of War 3 review, I believe. And there was talk of sexism in the game because there's a scene in the game where you can bang Aphrodite and like some other like chicks or whatever as Kratos, and then there was also some violence. You can kill like a siren or whatever. But whatever. It was like, it's God of War. It was that, okay? And they were saying that it was really sexist and violent and stuff. I think even the guy Adam Sessler said that. He actually did a whole thing on it, and it was in that documentary too. And David Jaffe he saw it, to him that came from nowhere, because his whole history with games was, he has this kind of like teenage boy mindset. Like, what would be fun for me as a 14-year-old kid? And that was the game. Those were the games he made. He was like, oh, cars shooting missiles at each other, or, be like a Greek warrior and just kill people. And I remember specifically in interviews before when they said, well, what was the inspiration for this? And he said, well, sometimes you have like a long day you have a long day at work and you come home, you just want to you just want to take out, blow off some steam. And so God of War is for that. That's why it was just like rage, right? That's the game. And when this game came out and they did all these criticisms, he was approached, and I think he said that this is bullshit. I'm not sexist. I don't hate women. I don't like all. He had to defend himself, and I thought it was ridiculous. And so I brought him on the show and we talked about it. And I warned him. I said, they're going to do this to your game, because even though this whole thing may have started off with people like, Zoe Quinn was making her own little game, Depression Quest. I didn't care about it. Had no. It could exist. I don't care. But like, I wasn't gonna play it. And then you had like Anita, and she was making videos about like how sexist games are and how they have to change. And if that was the whole thing, I wouldn't care. I mean, we can refute it. We can have a dialogue. I can counter her points. Whatever. I think Thunderfoot did like 1 million videos on it. But when you start making the games and you are involved in the process and you are injecting your ideology into shit and you are using the kind of generally like liberal mindset of game developers. These are creative people. They want to please everybody. They want to give the gamers what they want. And then you have someone like that, an activist, and they're saying, no, this is what gamers want. I'm like, it's going to change what you made. And he did not think it was going to happen. And then the God of War remake came out. And it changed Kratos. Now, I thought the God of War remake was all right. It was very pretty, but I didn't think it was as fun as the old games in terms of like just the scale and the action and all that. And then the next one came out, and David Jaffe saw that they shit on his character, Kratos. Now, of course, he doesn't officially own it anymore, but as an artist and a creative person myself, I thought, well, yeah, I could see that would feel like a stab in the back, because they're basically saying what you did was regressive, even though you created the brand that we are now making millions off of, but we're going to change it. And that's what they did. And he was upset. And all I could do was shrug and say, well, this is I don't know what you could have done, but you could have been more vocal, but you just can't like lie down and take it. And this has happened. I mean, I don't know, like basically almost every franchise, because
all right.
Okay.
You've been going a minute.
I know. I'm sorry.
All right. Now look, I'm all for people being able to make whatever they want, and I'm all for people being able to criticize whatever they want. If they don't like his game and they think he's sexist, like Kratos, blah blah blah, whatever the fuck, that's their opinion, man.
Sure, they can have that opinion.
If the game developer wants, I think what they should say, if they don't agree with that viewpoint, they can say, go fuck yourself. And I think people should stand up. I think people should voice their own views and criticize the games journalists if they do stuff like this. Now, when it comes to like ruining franchise, like if you view everything through like the lens of like everything, I guess that would matter in terms of politics, like through the lens of like pop culture, yes, the left does have a lot of significant power, and they're not doing a very good job with it at all in terms of the cultural sphere. I would agree. I criticize that fairly often, I guess. But I don't only care about the political, the culture war in media. I care about our political institutions, and I do think that the right definitely 100% poses. I know you wouldn't, maybe you wouldn't characterize the Republican Party as being the right, but I would. 100% represents a major threat to our democratic institutions, to our Constitution, and to the rule of law. I mean, we have a
who burned down the cities all over the country in 2020?
You said that Trump failed. Okay, yeah, he failed, and now he's the Republican nominee again. And
I didn't say he failed. I didn't say he failed.
You said it was unsuccessful.
Well, I don't think he intended to do the thing that the media says, but we'll just say that. What do you think he
intended to do?
I think that he wanted a protest, and I think that you can look at the evidence of that. I don't think he wanted an attack on the Capitol. I think a lot of people believe it, but I don't think that's what he intended.
It's not just the attack on the Capitol. He planned on declaring victory before any votes were even cast. And then
he has a tendency to talk shit.
Yeah, and then he did declare victory.
Okay.
On election night, before the votes were counted, before anyone could possibly determine the winner, and he knew this at the time, and he planned on doing it ahead of time anyway. And then he tried to take his cases to the courts, which is great. He has every right to do that. I agree. But when he lost the court cases, he decided, what did he want to do? He wanted to send fake electors to Congress. He had a whole fake elector scheme where he wanted to send a fake slate of electors from multiple states that did not represent the lawful votes cast in those states to the Electoral College. Then he also tried to pressure Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State of Georgia, to find him the votes that he would need to win the election in Georgia. And then he decided that he was going to hold a massive rally, and he directed those people to go to the Capitol to protest, and he did say peacefully. But I don't think that matters. I don't think that one word in an hour-long speech matters. I think that he made his intentions very clear. He told them that they were taking their country from them, to fight like hell, and then when they do attack the Capitol and they do get inside of the Capitol, he does nothing for 2.5 hours. He watches television and he calls members of Congress and tells them that he wants them to throw out, he wants them to delay the Electoral College vote. And he tells the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, he tells him on the phone that it seems that they're more mad about the election than you are. And then finally, after being pressured by multiple people, he finally calls in the National Guard, which was his responsibility to do hours ago. Because it looked like it looked like his whole plot had failed. And so he calls them off, and what does he do? He makes a video telling them, "Go home, we love you, you're very special." And he knew the election wasn't stolen. I think that's
yeah, I didn't want to really make this about Trump. I think that it's
but
because I didn't really.
It's important to outline, though. Like you say that the left and the right aren't identical. They're not identical. Like the left is bad in cultural ways because they make movies that you don't like. Like I think that's a bit different though than engaging in anti-democratic politics.
Okay, let me ask you this. If you believe that someone with an R next to their name, a Republican, represents the right, then do you also believe that someone with a D next to their name, a Democrat, represents the left?
In the political context, yes. Like that doesn't mean they represent everybody. Yeah, that means that they don't represent like every single person who's on the left or on the right. We live in a two-party system, a first past the post system.
Sure.
But broadly speaking, in terms of American politics, yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to know. So I'm not gonna go because I think we're losing too much time on this Trump thing, but all I will say is the culture is very important. It affects politics down the line, as it were. And I think that it's not just the left makes movies I don't like. It's that they spread propaganda through the media, through movies, through music, through video games, in order to shape the minds of young people and adults. And I think it has dangerous implications if the other side is not heard. For example, I'll speak as a men's issues advocate. As a men's issues advocate, we are never given a platform. We are ignored, we are dismissed. And when we can't be ignored, what the media will do is it will find the absolute worst examples of anything that is remotely related to us, such as Andrew Tate, for example, and they make him the poster boy of us because they want us dismissed. And they use that as a weapon to say, look, this is what the red pill is, or this is what men's rights activists are. And it has tremendous power because we still are not heard. And because of that, there are record high suicides, in particular in white men. Straight white men have the highest rates, like 8 times higher than black people, 4 times higher than women. And nobody cares because that's not convenient, because we have to constantly paint women as victims. I'm saying that because this is a very important, it's not related to Gamergate, but it is a sort of an explanation of how the media affects our perception of reality. I used to live in Chicago when I was growing. I was born there. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. I lived there up until 2020. And in 2020, there were the George Floyd riots. The George Floyd riots happened because the media lied. And they lied intentionally. And what happened was cities were burned to the ground. Police were retiring left and right, or they were fired. And I have a video on my channel that goes through the truth of what happened. and you can watch it or not. I've lost friends over this. I don't care anymore. I'm just saying this is what happened. And the damage is irreversible. And my wife and I had to flee the city because of how much chaos there was. Now, I'm not asking for sympathy, and I'm not saying this to play the victim. I'm just showing you the consequences of lies. Lies the media has told. If Gamergate is about ethics in games journalism, then it is part of a much larger and much more important and impactful conversation about journalism in general. And this is the reason why I think that so many people are doing work independently, because they can't, it's all just paid for. It's establishment crap. And I think that, this is the thing that I think that people are missing. And I don't care what your politics are. I'm going to presume that we all want to live in a safe, prosperous, and secure society. And I think there are people who live here that genuinely don't. And, that's it. I mean, I'm just saying, like, that's where I'm coming from. I'm just telling you what my experience is.
All right, I don't think that people should be smearing men's rights activists either. I think that they actually have gotten like a bit of a bad reputation because of basically lies about them, because they were excluded from the Overton window. And I've spoken out, not like regularly, but like at various points throughout my life in defense of their freedom of speech, including at Calgary Expo. So yeah, I agree that there is an exclusion of the Overton. There's a shrinking of the Overton window that's excluding certain groups, large numbers of people, large swaths of the country, essentially. And one of the groups that was attacked early on was the men's rights group. Now, when it comes to riots, yeah, obviously I support peaceful protests. I don't support people rioting, a basic position basically that everyone probably holds. But you say that, I gotta ask. George Floyd, the people protested because of lies? What do you mean by lies about George Floyd's case specifically?
And then he gives us another $5 and he says, question for Tachyon Blue. Was January 6th worse than September 11th?
Worse. I don't know if I'd say like worse. I don't know if you can like really compare them. Not necessarily analogous. I'd say that Donald Trump on January 6th, for the first time in American history, had tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power in the United States. And that's a pretty serious problem. It's a different kind of problem than an external threat like terrorism. It's a problem where you have a lawmaker who is essentially trying to usurp additional powers and use extra legal means to remain in office. It's a different kind of threat. Possibly more dangerous, actually. Because, at least with 9/11, I don't think that the United States of America as an entity, or a constitution, or our system of government was necessarily at that much risk on 9/11.
All right.
I do think that our system of government is at risk now.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for all the super chows, Richard. And hey, when you talk, are you getting like an echo